Okay, so here I'm going to try to show how to create a path that an object can follow during an animation. This is a bit tricky to do correctly, and that's why I'm recording this video. I'm using one of the previous SVG files that I've been using in previous examples, and I have here a cloud image. This is actually inside a clipping mask here in this layer. Actually, the mask is hidden. That's why we see the cloud, because the mask is actually just for the screen. So let me see if I can demonstrate here. So if I turn on the mask, you don't see the cloud, and the cloud will only be seen when it's on the smartphone screen. So what we would like to do is, instead of having a linear animation where the cloud moves just in a straight line, we would like to make it move smoothly over a curve. So let's try to do this. I'm going to turn off the mask just because it makes it easier than to see. And so let's draw here a curve. I'm not going to pay much attention to the curve. I'm just going to draw something that's curvy enough for us then to see the animation. So this is enough, and as you can see here, of course, I'm extended the curve a bit beyond the edges of the screen, but you could draw something that would reach only from exactly the limits of the screen. So this way, if we animate, when we animate the cloud, it should follow this path. That's the kind of the intention. So it should follow like this. The tricky part here is that we cannot just leave the SVG as it is and export it. Otherwise, the animation the cloud will not actually be correctly positioned. So we need to make sure that we position the cloud over the 0, 0 of our drawing, which is on the top left corner. So I'm going to position here the cloud in a way that, to me, the reference point that makes sense for the cloud is the center point. So I'm placing the center point of the cloud over the corner of my drawing. So this corner is the 0, 0 for my drawing, and we need to position the cloud there. So now we have this. I should turn on the mask again before exporting the SVG. And actually, this path here, we won't be using the path directly in the SVG, but we need to leave it here, and then we will just hide it through JavaScript. So I will just give it a name so that it's easier than to identify. So I'll call it cloud path. And we need to export it within the SVG, so I cannot turn off the visibility here in Illustrator, otherwise it won't come out in the SVG. So it needs to be on. You could theoretically just turn the opacity all the way down to 0 and it would be invisible and it should be still exported. But since we already have that technique for hiding layers in JavaScript, I'll just leave it as it is, and then I will hide it. So now I think I have everything, so I'll just export to SVG. And I'll call it, I'll overwrite this file here, and everything seems fine. Okay. So now what we must do is we go to our project and we paste, so we upload our SVG there. Of course, I'm overwriting, so I'm recording the example that I had already done. Now, what we must do, the first thing we must do is, of course, make sure that the SVG is showing in the index.html, and then we need to inspect it so that we can find the motion path that we just drew. So I need to search for the cloud path. Here it is, and we must copy this value here. This is actually the coordinates, the list of coordinates for the individual points of the curve. So we need to copy this. The way to copy this in the browser is just to double click, and it should select the data that we want. So we just hit copy, and then we go back to the style CSS in our project. And here in the animation, here's where we are kind of configuring the animation for the cloud and stating that we want it to follow the curve. And the actual curve needs to be here in the CSS. So we need to copy the curve from the SVG to the CSS. And we need to copy it here where it says offset path and then the path function, and between the quotes we just paste what we copied from the SVG. And then the rest is the configuration of the animation. So we called it here move me animation 10 seconds. I'm making the cloud go to the right and then to the left, so the direction is alternating, and it's an infinite animation. And the way it works is this path, we will place the cloud over a certain distance, a certain offset distance from the beginning of the path, and it starts at 0%, so it starts in the beginning of the path. And the animation, so the keyframes, just make sure that the offset, the last offset distance will be 100%. So when the animation ends at 10 seconds, the cloud will be at 100% distance from the beginning of the path, so it will be basically at the end of the path. And so with this configuration, we just need the final thing, which is to make sure we go to our script and we select the path element, and we just hide it so that it doesn't appear. I will comment out this so you see what happens. So we will see the path and the cloud over it. So now we have here the path, and there you see the cloud moving over it. Of course, it's at some point it disappears. So here actually there's a slight vertical offset. I think this is because I had pre-configured the animation with a slightly different SVG. So this should be, the path should be exactly over, the motion should be exactly over the path. But I think that's just because I have been doing several iterations for this example. But at the final result should be this. So we have now an animation, an element being moved across the screen, following a curve instead of following a straight path. A final thing that you may want to experiment with is turning off this offset rotate. So right now it's 0 degrees, so the cloud will always be with the same orientation. But if we comment this out, then by default the orientation, the rotation of the cloud or orientation will follow the orientation of the path itself. So the result is something like this. So you see that the cloud now, of course, in this particular case, it doesn't make much sense. But if you had like a car following a road, for instance, it would make sense for the car to curve along with the road. For the cloud, it doesn't make sense, so I'm going to make sure that it's always rotated 0 degrees.